Find out why a 5K might be better than smoking cigarettes on today's episode. Welcome to the Licensure Lifeline podcast. This is your host, Matt Lawson, and today we're going to be building a bit more off of the behavior psychology that we went over in the last episode. I thought I would put out a little bit of a scenario similar to what you might see on the NCMHCE, and we're going to break it down a bit, looking at some of the different themes around behaviorism that you might see on a test. So my hope is to really give a bit of a deeper understanding of behaviorism, but also really taking a look at how to dissect these questions. Maria is a 28-year-old woman seeking therapy for smoke cessation. She has been smoking for 10 years and has tried multiple methods to quit, including things like the nicotine patch, reducing the number of cigarettes per day, using some type of peer support system. She's even gone and visited with a nurse practitioner in order to monitor and get support around her cigarette use. Maria reports that she tends to smoke the most when she is stressed or anxious, especially at work. She also notes that she's a bit of a social smoker. Whenever she goes out with her friends, drinking, she tends to smoke a lot more. During the intake session, Maria tells the therapist that smoking helps her calm down and deal with stress. The therapist decides to use behavioral interventions to help Maria to reduce and eventually stop smoking. Let's take a bit of a closer look at this scenario. Maria's smoking behavior is likely being reinforced by the negative reinforcement of stress reduction. When Maria smokes, it removes her feelings of stress or anxiety, making it more likely she will smoke again in future stressful situations. The first step in analyzing a scenario like this is to identify the behavior that needs modification. In this case, smoking. And you also want to determine what's reinforcing that behavior. Here, the stress reduction is reinforcing her smoking habit. Now that we've identified the key components, let's look at how you might answer some questions about this scenario. Given this scenario, a behavior therapist might use several different techniques to help Maria quit smoking. Apparent conditioning techniques such as positive reinforcement or negative punishment could be employed. So positive reinforcement here might involve providing Maria with rewards or praise when she chooses not to smoke. I really like positive reinforcement as a behavioral technique. It's so simple and it works so well. If you've ever had anybody that you've worked with that responds well to praise, especially when I was a personal trainer back in the day, I would oftentimes employ this technique and give people rewards that they could work toward as part of reaching their goals, and people respond to it. It's one of those things again that's just so simple, yet we respond to it. Now, you can also use negative punishment here, and this is going to be removing a privilege or a benefit when she smokes. This is a little bit harder to do. Whenever I've used negative punishment in this way, I typically have a person pick out some of the things that they will deny themselves if they don't follow through with the behavior that they want to change, which can be tough because you're leaving it up to the person to deny themselves something that they really like, really enjoy, really adds pleasure to their lives. And it's a hard place to hard thing for a lot of people to do. Alternatively, you can also use some classical conditioning techniques to help Maria with her smoking habits. This is another area that I really tend to use more than like negative punishment. Replacing a not so great behavior with a healthier behavior that maybe aligns a little bit better with the individual's goals. So as I kind of mentioned before I was a therapist, I was a personal trainer. And I've used a lot of the work that I do with people I have now is helping them create healthy lifestyles. And part of things like smoke cessation, stuff like that, I do try to get them to better align with a healthier way of being over what they're doing now. So it's very hard for somebody to smoke. It's very hard for somebody to engage in like unhealthy eating, things like that, when they are building a healthier lifestyle. Most of the people I work with sign up with me because they want that as part of the work that they're doing. So it's not like most of the time it's not like I'm reinventing the wheel for these individuals, but creating these healthier behaviors that just don't line up with the behavior that they want to change. So getting somebody hyped about running a 5K, and joggers and smokers like tend not to mix very well, and jogging and smoking tends not to mix very well. So things like that fall into that classical conditioning category. Okay, so that's how we can break down a scenario from a behaviorist point of view. Let's go over some questions that can again highlight what we can pull from that scenario. So, question one: which behavioral technique would be most appropriate for helping Maria to quit smoking? Would it be A, systemic desensitization, B, counter conditioning, C, cognitive restructuring, or D, role playing? I know we haven't really gone over a lot of these, the basis of a lot of these questions, but the answer to this is going to be counter conditioning. The explanation here: counter conditioning is a technique that helps replace an unwanted behavior, smoking, with a more adaptive response, e.g., relaxation exercises, meditation, just exercising in general. Since Maria smokes to manage her stress, counter conditioning can help her replace the smoking habit with a healthier non-smoking habit. Again, this is a technique I use a lot of time for anybody that is trying to change some type of behavior, like around eating or drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes, trying to give them healthier alternatives that better align with really what they want. Counter conditioning. Question two: which form of reinforcement is maintaining Maria's smoking behavior? Is it positive reinforcement, negative reinforcement, positive punishment, or negative punishment? The answer to this one is going to be B, negative reinforcement. Maria's smoking is negatively reinforced because it removes an unpleasant stimulus, her feelings of stress and anxiety. When Maria smokes, the reduction in stress reinforces the behavior, making it more likely she will continue smoking when she's stressed. Question number three: what might the therapist suggest to break the association between smoking and stress relief? A, exposure therapy, B, token economy, C, relaxation techniques, or D, aversion therapy? So the answer to this one's going to be C, relaxation techniques. Kind of in line with a lot of the stuff we've been talking about here, which that is actually something that's a good point to make. A lot of the times on both the NCE and NCMHCE, you will kind of pick up on some themes around what they're looking for. That's not a guarantee, but pay attention to that. You know, if there's something that they're looking for, like around behavioral therapy, granted, like a lot of the every single question here that was mentioned is kind of in the behavior therapy realm, but the relaxation technique kind of goes with a lot of the stuff that we've been talking about replacing unhealthy behavior with a healthier behavior that aligns in it. But the explanation to this is, since Maria smokes to reduce stress, teaching her relaxation techniques such as a deep breathing or mindfulness can serve as a healthier alternative to smoking for stress relief. This is an example of using behavioral strategies to replace the unwanted behavior with a more adaptive one. All right, that's going to be it for the questions. So, with the NCMHCE, you're going to have a bunch of different scenarios that you're going to take and dissect. Um, so the first thing here is you want to identify the core behavior that needs to be modified, analyzed. And a lot of these tests, the first handful of questions start with the intake, and you're just gathering information about the individual and trying to figure out what needs to be addressed. In Maria's case, it's negative reinforcement of stress reduction through smoking. From there, we're going to identify which behavioral techniques would work best in this situation. So you'll start to see a pattern with the way these questions are being asked, the way um, the different sections are kind of put out there. So it's going to be like information gathering. Then you'll have some stuff maybe on some assessments to further figure out like what's going on. Then you're going to go into like what you actually need to do, what techniques, what strategies, how you're going to give the person therapy. And then maybe from there they'll throw you some different scenario or different questions just around what kind of follow up. Sometimes, it's kind of funny. They'll do things like the person that you're working with decides to ask you on a date. What should you do? I'm not kidding. I've seen that question. Not that cut and dry. It's a little bit more involved, of course, because it's the NCMHCE. But you'll start to see again like some different patterns here with how the questions are being asked and how to gear your mind toward answering those questions. But just remember, the NCMHCE in particular is about clinical judgment. It's about applying that knowledge that you have gained from your work as a therapist. And for scenarios rooted in behaviorism, always start by identifying the behavior and the reinforcement patterns. Once you know that, you can select the right interventions based on the context of the behavior. All right, everyone. Thank you again for listening. I hope you got something out of this episode. Really hope to do some more like this where we can go over these actual scenarios where you can apply a lot of these things that I'm actually talking about. But until next time, keep studying.